Nelda almost anything. And predictably, my name is Nelda Schulte. And I'm joined by Gil Donkersgood, the Father Christmas in the corner there. And we're in Alberta and BC property investors with former property management business that we used to have based out of Calgary. And I now have an online business called neldaschulte.com. And this helps property investors and landlords build a profitable do-it-yourself landlord business with reasonably priced and free resources, including my book. If you haven't gotten it yet, run out and buy it on Amazon.ca, Canadian Landlord's Handbook. You can also get it in an ebook version for $1.49. So, I mean, really, how much cheaper does it need to get than that? Not much, I ask. So I host these programs because when I started, I made so many expensive mistakes in real estate. I stepped in so many landmines that I really don't want that to happen to you. And I've made it my mission to help you bypass those. And to that end, part of the support that I provide is bringing in experts to share their knowledge and their skills with you. And tonight's topic is achieving financial freedom with real estate. And our expert tonight is Felix Wortman of Cloud9 Life. Welcome, Felix.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. And by the way, when you stay to the end of tonight's show, Felix has been really generous and he's going to share 2 special offers as giveaways, and he's going to tell you all about it at the end of our show tonight. So stay tuned for those. And I'm just going to launch right in here. I'm going to start asking Felix some questions that I can grill him with. So Felix, why and how did you get started in real estate investing?
Well, I have a funny story. I put myself through university with 2 full-time jobs, but I took out OSAP loans, and those jobs enabled me to essentially not having to use those OSAP loans. OSAP loans are essentially government-assisted loans for my university education. By the time I got out, I was able to repay the entire loan, but instead of repaying the entire loan, I decided to use those funds and actually buy my first property. And the reason why I did that was because when I was about 16 years old, we used to get phone calls every couple of weeks from one of my very closest friends' moms. She owned several properties. Both of our families arrived to Canada around the same time. They arrived in the late 1970s. I immigrated to Canada back in the 1980s, actually 1980 specifically. And I just found that they were kind of getting ahead. Same kind of similar incomes, both families, but they were getting ahead much more quicker than we were. And the reason why she was giving us a call is because she needed a couple of strong bodies. So it was me and another 3 friends. Whenever we got that call, it basically meant that she needed us to move one of those heavy appliances that broke down in one of her units. And back then, a fridge or a stove, they were made with real metal, not this cheap plastic stuff. And if you weren't careful, you can give yourself a hernia. So we needed to move these things out of one unit, like a basement unit, and then replace it with an equally heavy used working stove back in the unit. And so I asked her one day, I'm like going, why the heck would you ever want to do this? So she kind of ran through the numbers for me, and it kind of always stuck with me. It made sense. So by the time I got out of university, I bought my first property. It was my first and only condo. We renovated it. And then I finally realized, wait a second, regardless of what the heck we do to this thing, we will always continue paying out of pocket to live here. So just over a year after we purchased it, we sold it after real estate commissions actually generated a loss of about $5,000, even though and instead bought the semi-detached home with a walkout basement and rented out that basement to students. And what we found is that by renting it out to these students, they were able, the income that we were getting from the student rentals was sufficient to cover all of our mortgage payments monthly, all of our property taxes. Really, the only thing we were on the hook for is the utilities for that home. And we had a much better, accommodations versus the condo, and living, our accommodation costs were almost nothing. So that always stuck with me. And I went through that period. That happened in 1998. I sold off that property in 2004 when I got married. And since then, I was, in a bout of analysis paralysis all the way up to the financial crisis, got the jitters during the financial crisis, always had this interest in real estate, within the GTA, the Greater Toronto area. And after the financial crisis, We took a trip down to Florida. My in-laws bought a place down there during the right after the financial crisis.
Mhm.
I started driving around with a real estate agent, and I told my wife, "Hey, I can make a go of it here." And she's like, "Going, there's no way in hell I'm moving down to Florida." So I came back home and started exploring other avenues and other ways that I could invest in real estate locally. And by that time, the greater Toronto market was roaring on fire price wise. The numbers didn't make any sense. I'm a CACPA by trade, so I can run numbers very, very well. So I started to explore these surrounding areas around the greater Toronto area, and I came across Hamilton. And when I decided to go into my real estate investment journey, I decided to go with jump into it with both feet. Within 3 weeks, we had 2 properties under contract, and so the journey began.
Well, that's great. So, kind of stops and starts, and then got you to rethink things. Florida kind of made you reconsider, and your wife saying, "There's no way in hell I'm moving to Florida," made you take a look at the Canadian market. So when I just want to bring this up because when I saw you at the Ontario Landlords Watch conference in Ontario, you were pretty down on the Canadian market. And I know this isn't part of the question I was supposed to ask you, but are you still down on the Canadian market? Are you still looking south of the border?
It's on a region by region basis. I honestly think the Ontario market has probably, especially specifically Southwestern Ontario, and more specifically the Greater Golden Horseshoe, probably has the best dynamics out of the entire country as far as supply, demand, restriction of land use in the area, and it's one of the worst areas to get a building permit in all of the developed world countries across the globe. So from a real estate dynamics perspective, it's excellent, but the cost of housing is now oppressively expensive down here.
Yeah.
The numbers are not really working too well. I'm still able to assist my clients in purchasing cash flow positive or participating in cash flow positive strategies, but now we're down to the lowest common denominator. The only thing that I am recommending right now is single family to 3-unit conversions, which is something I pioneered in Ontario back in 2018. And we can certainly get into that as well, basically. But as far as where to invest in the country, I mean, Canada is vast. When we're talking about the real estate market, there is no such thing as a Canadian real estate market. It's on a region by region, municipal by municipal basis, and even within the municipalities, you got to really know where you're focused on, where the numbers work, and which areas work, which ones don't, what kind of tenant class you're going to attract within those specific neighborhoods. You have to go to that micro level. So you have to take a top-down approach to evaluate. I honestly think that at this stage, the Alberta market is probably amongst the best in all of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
It's landlord friendly, significantly more
Yes.
landlord friendly than Ontario. The
Mhm.
price points are significantly less, and the numbers still work. And you can do a lot of things there that, and employ several strategies that are no longer really possible or feasible in Southwestern Ontario, such as rent to owns, as an example. You might not be able to cash flow positive on a buy and hold property necessarily these days with today's interest rates, but you can certainly basically make the numbers work with a rent to own and several other strategies as well.
Right. Okay. And that is a very nice segue into the next question. What strategies have you undertaken, and why did you use them? What did they accomplish?
For sure. A better question would be, what strategy have I not undertaken? When I started off, I did the bread and butter, which is your buy and hold property, turnkey, fully renovated, was able to rent it out with with positive cash flow from day one. Once the prices moved higher, where that was no longer feasible, we were basically concentrating more on the rent to own strategy. And I've done several of them throughout, from 2011 to 2015. The real estate prices in Ontario have been spiking higher and higher and higher and higher for the better part of the last 20 years, and more specifically, the last 7 years, and even more specifically, the last 2 years, even with today's correction in pricing. So by 2015, even the rent to owns were not really working all that well, and I was basically spreading the net as wide as possible. I mean, I started diversifying geographically within the Greater Golden Horseshoe. I was buying properties in Barrie, in Brantford, in Hamilton. And by 2016, I made my way into Niagara region. And so that would be the St. Catharines, Welland, and Niagara Falls regions. And what I found by 2015, since the rent-to-owns were not working anymore, the numbers simply didn't make too much sense anymore. I started doing single-family to two-unit conversions. So dipped my toes into that market and have been doing them ever since. And in 2018, I did my very first three-unit conversion project. And unfortunately, there's only one city in all of Ontario that allows for them, based on their interpretation of the Ontario Building Code. Now that's going to be changing soon because Ontario has a Bill 23 where you'll be able to do this, excuse me, as of right, regardless of zoning. But any of my clients who have done two-unit conversions and then dip their toes into 3 units, they never want to see another two-unit conversion ever again. Only because the numbers made a hell of a lot more sense. You're essentially buying the property for the same price as you would a two-unit conversion project. The cost to complete that third unit, incremental third unit, anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 extra. But you're getting, when I started doing them, the first 2 units were already made the property cash flow positive, which meant that third unit was pure profit, pure cash flow. So back then we were cash flowing anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000 a month on a single property, which is amazing.
That's great. Yeah.
Right. These days, with the higher interest rates, obviously the cash flow has come down with those type of projects, especially with the price increases combined with the higher interest rates. But it's one of the only strategies still available where you can actually achieve positive cash flow, even in the Ontario market.
So I'm trying to think of how do you convert a two unit into a 3 unit? Does it have to have a certain amount of square footage? No, or do they have to have their own kitchen and their own bathroom and their own?
So I do it very differently. I mean, a lot of people, when they think of three units, they're thinking about, that third unit being a garden suite or a coach house or a laneway house.
Yeah.
I do things very differently. I use only the existing building envelope of an existing single family home. Typically they're bungalows. I've done them in every single iteration you can think of, 4-level side splits, 4-level back splits, raised ranches with garages, without garages, with additions, without additions. And typically, I mean, you still have to be compliant with Ontario Building Code, like as far as minimum square footage requirements for each of the principal rooms. But it takes a bit of vision. I mean, I've done them in homes that are as big as 2,400 square feet, all the way down to 1,150 square feet. And as far as unit sizes are concerned, they could go, again, 1,400 square feet, all the way to the smallest that I've ever done was a full 1-bedroom apartment that I converted out of an attached single-car garage that's less than 234 square feet.
Wow, that's really tiny.
And it's
so do they have to be rezoned? Do you have to rezone the area or
no?
There isn't any of that? No.
Just 2 building permits. And the reason why we need the 2 building permits is to avoid the development charges. When I initially started, I mean, it was so new for the city that they allowed me to do it with 1 building permit for the first couple of projects. But then the region came down on them going, whoa. If you do that, then development.
Felix.
Well, they're going, if you're going to do that, development charges apply. So the loophole to that is to create 2 separate permits, one for each accessory dwelling unit. And that's how we got away with that.
That's interesting. Okay, that's the first time I've ever heard that. 3 units per property. But that would make a lot of sense.
So just so I'm clear, are we talking you're basically making legal suites within the unit? Is that what the conversion is?
All legal, 3 units out of think of it a bungalow that you can convert into 3 units.
Right.
Different iterations.
So it's a single property. Like you're not dividing the property into separate properties. It's a single property owned by a single person who can rent out a couple suites. Okay. Yeah.
Or you as an investor can rent out all 3 suites, right?
Right.
We're not doing any additions. So this is the other key. We're not doing any additions. We're not basically paying that costly, pouring of a new foundation for a new addition or, adding an exterior wall or whatever. We're only using the existing building envelope that's existing there. Now you still have to know what to look for. There's parking considerations and whatnot.
Of course, yeah.
And there's a few other nuances with the 3 units versus 2 units. But generally speaking, it's very similar to a 2-unit project, as long as the site plan accommodates the number of parking spaces required, the water supply coming in is sufficient. So normally It's very common for us to upgrade the water supply. But the nice thing is, I mean, the service is already located inside the property. So it's not as if like we're basically, creating a new sewage line going to the property. We're just
Right.
using the existing sewage line.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So then the third question kind of ties into this one too. So why do you need to pivot from one strategy to another? But that makes perfect sense. It's like you've kind of explained that already. If you're not cash flowing, you have to figure out a way to cash flow. How do you make it cash flow without recreating the wheel? What regions do you need to go to? And then I'll let you finish the rest here.
For sure. I mean, to me, being cash flow positive is imperative in any investment strategy they undertake. The other thing that you want to make sure is that you have a plan A, B, and C. Take a look at what's happening with our real estate markets today, all across the country, really, and it's more exacerbated in places like Ontario. Positive cash flow is your insurance policy, really, right? It allows you to weather any storm, right? If you basically just buy a property with the hopes of price appreciation, you're caught with your pants down today in many parts of the country, right? And whereas people who have that positive cash flow can weather this storm, like interest rates go up, yes, their cash flow takes a hit, but as long as you're not putting money out of your own pocket, and rule one of any investing is your investment should be paying you, not the other way around, right? So that's why I'm a firm believer in positive cash flow, especially for novice, intermediate investors, and even advanced investors. There's certainly other strategies like development that doesn't have those type of aspects, but those are totally different animals, right?
Mm-hmm. 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 Great. So how were you able to scale your portfolio and your wealth over time? Starting with your first condo and then moving into your house and then scaling to all these other properties you've been telling me about. How did you do it?
So in 2010, I was still working full-time as a CFO for a multi-unit renovation company. Their clients included the who's who of the major REITs in Canada. And I was ready to put my head through the wall. I got sick and tired of all the bureaucracy, the BS from the CEO, and I was reporting directly to the CEO. The final nail in the coffin, honestly, was my wife had gestational diabetes. And so we had a scheduled C-section for my daughter, and my daughter unfortunately had other plans. So I advised my boss, the CEO of the company, when the scheduled C-section was supposed to be, but my daughter decided to come early by about 2 weeks. And so I went to be with my wife. Our daughter was born, and instead of getting, I got this form letter, like an HR form letter from the company, no calls, nothing like that, saying, well, you knew when your daughter was going to be born, but and because you left for 2 weeks on parental leave, now you left us in a really bad position.
God forbid you can have a personal life. Like, darn your daughter for getting born early.
Yeah, because of the companies, it's not that I left them in a bad position. I actually turned them around. I mean, they were about to go belly up. All the lines of credits were maxed out. This was in the height of the financial crisis. The REITs were not paying them, and as a result, if we weren't getting paid, the contractors were not getting paid. Several audits. Within 6 months, I turned it all around. Essentially, all their lines of credits were fully paid off. I had the contractors back on track. Found an additional $500,000 of unbilled revenue, and it actually got a refund from the government with respect to HST, but for another $300,000. So really, basically, put them back on board. And despite all of that, this is what I had to deal with. So that was kind of the final nail in the coffin. That right there and then, I decided that's it. I'm done. But obviously, excuse me, I couldn't go cold turkey. I still needed some sort of income to support myself and my family. So I created a 4-year plan, 4 to 5 year plan to get out of the corporate life. So any new opportunities that I undertook tend to be more consulting roles. And by the end of 2014, beginning of 2015 was my last contracting consulting role. Got my real estate license at that time, not because I wanted to be a real estate agent. Honestly, it was mainly because I wanted to be a full-time real estate investor. And to enable me to do that, I was going to be sourcing my own deals, and any commissions I would have earned from buying those properties would have provided me with seed capital for my next purchase, my next investment, or my next renovation. Oddly enough, family and friends started taking notice of what I was doing and started saying, hey, can you help me do what you do? And, my whole real estate clients, I'm an investor focused real estate agent, and that's all I do. kind of grew from that. Like to this day, my advertising budget is zero. So
Excellent.
In the meantime, I mean, I tested all these strategies on myself first as a guinea pig. Whether it's a different location, different municipality, different strategy. I want to be darn sure that, I tested all these strategies, made sure that they work, make sure that the location worked, make sure that the numbers all jived and were verified. And then and only then was I bringing in my clients to those specific locations and advising them to employ those strategies. And they have done extremely well as a result of that as well.
That's great. So my last question before I hand the reins over to Gil is, so when did you come to the realization that, okay, I no longer have to work for anyone else. I'm fine as I am. I don't have to take consulting jobs anymore. When did that happen? How many years in your 5-year plan?
The funny thing is, you mean like when I started?
Yeah.
So when I started, I went again. I went cold turkey with respect to getting out of the corporate world. I didn't have any income coming in whatsoever, but I had faith in myself and what I was doing. At that stage, I was already investing for about 5 years, so I knew that I could make a go of it. I was able to refinance several of my properties, and from those funds was able to redeploy that capital into the next property, the next property, the next property. And then I started doing BRRRRs as well. So once I started doing the conversions at the end of 2015, that's when the whole BRRRR strategy, even before it became a term, that's what I was employing there in order to access capital out of my existing properties and roll it over into the next opportunity and the next opportunity, and I'd say probably about over 50% of my portfolio was actually built between 2018 and 2019. To be really honest, I went on a really big tear. And the reason being is in Ontario, the former Liberal government, they enacted something called the Fair Housing Act, which was anything but fair for anyone concerned.
Fair for who?
So that caused a bit of a temporary correction, more exasperating in the GTA area, but there was a period of about a year to 2 years in the outlying areas and up to 4 years in the GTA where prices, there was a correction and people started getting antsy. Now, as a real estate agent, I have to provide all the opportunities. If my clients are looking for a specific opportunity, I have to give it to them, whether I want to buy it myself or not. So they got cold feet during that period. I'm like going, okay, you buggers, you don't want to buy? Guess what? I'll be my own best client. And that's where I went on a tear during that period.
Good for you. Good for you. Okay. Excellent. So Gil's going to take over from here.
Okay. So first question we wanted to ask, or the next question we wanted to ask, is what does financial freedom mean to you?
Financial freedom it's a similar question to what does retirement mean to someone, because technically I retired 2 years ago almost. What does financial freedom mean to me? It's basically, that same old saying, doing what you want, where you want, with whom you want, as much as you want, for as long as you want. That's essentially what that means to me. My own personal preference, the goal that I'm creating for myself is I want to take at least 1 week vacation on average per month. I can't see myself sitting on the beach, lying on the beach permanently. I'd be bored out of my skull. I like to stay productive. I would like to level up. It's a personal growth thing, and I want to help as many people as possible to do what I have achieved myself. But at the same time, it gives me an opportunity to kind of look forward to something every month. You come back from vacation, work for about 2-3 weeks, or maybe 2 months, and then go for on vacation for a week or a couple of weeks or even a month. So to me, I love traveling, so that kind of jives well with what I want for my own life. But it's not because I have to work; it's because I love doing what I do. It's not because I need to invest any further, but I want to basically grow my portfolio. Take care of my family, build a legacy, and help as many people as I can along the way as a way to pay it forward.
Good stuff.
Yes. So how do you determine which strategies are most or least appropriate for each of your real estate and coaching clients?
It really depends on the level of my coaching clients. So for novices, I try to keep it as simple as possible. Clearly, there's much more opportunities and many more options in places like Alberta at the present time. So a lot of those options no longer exist in Southwestern Ontario. For somebody to have somebody recommending a 3-unit conversion is a very highly capital intensive endeavor. You know, you have to come up with a 20% down payment and then come up with another $250,000 in some cases to execute on that business strategy. There are some, given the correction that's happened right now, we're still able to maybe pick up a semi-detached home, but at that stage, I would probably recommend they'd have to come up with a bigger down payment just to make the numbers work. That's just the reality. And then as far as, but in places like Alberta, like I said, you know, the single family home buy and hold strategy might still work even to this day, right? Depending on where you are. And then as far as location is concerned, you know, it's also location specific. So clearly I'm not recommending anybody buy any properties in the GTA at all because the numbers make absolutely no sense whatsoever. And then determining which specific neighborhoods to focus on and which strategy would work for each client, because all their needs, you know, how active they want to be in as an investor, how passive they want to be, all those things are discussed right up front to see what their preferences are, how much time they want to devote. And that's unique to every single one of my clients, right? Some of them want to be passive in nature. You know, really also comes down to like their access to capital. You know, do they have access to capital? Do they have access to credit? You know, all of these questions need to be answered in order prior to me advising them as to which strategies would be the most appropriate for them.
It's not in my questions, but I have a question anyway, a different question. For your investments, for the properties that you have, it sounds like you cover a fair bit of geography. Are you all Ontario, or do you go out of Ontario for your properties?
No. So over the last couple of years, the last property I personally purchased myself, it was a 2-unit conversion that I did in Stony Creek, which is part of the city of Hamilton.
Great.
Since then, I've been focusing on refinancing the vast majority of my portfolio and redeploying that capital into more private equity syndicated private equity deals, both on the multifamily side and the development side, both within Ontario and south of the border in places like the greater Phoenix area of Arizona, the greater Atlanta area of Georgia. Again, it goes to different strategies based on my needs and what I want to accomplish, essentially. Some of them are cash flow positive, some are or have no cash flow at all, you know, but the return, you're always looking at the risk versus return,
right.
Ratio. You know, at the end of the day, you don't want to lose money. So one of the things I do is actually, again, diversify across geographies, across several projects. I don't put all my eggs in one basket. You know, and I'm still in Ontario. Actually, I shouldn't say I haven't bought anything in Ontario. I'm actually an equity partner in a 94-unit building, apartment building in Kingston, Ontario. We just closed on it in June, actually. But that's more passive. I'm a limited partner. I'm in the driver's seat there. In the Atlanta deal, I'm actually one of the co-general partners. So I'm participating in that deal both ways, as both a limited partner and a general partner. So I'm both an active and a passive partner, right?
You're multi-talented.
Yes.
Thank you.
And like once a property is, for any buy and holds that you have, do you manage them yourself or do you hire a property manager?
So clearly for the multifamilies, I wouldn't even imagine managing those ones myself. But for my own real estate portfolio within Southwestern Ontario, I still do manage them personally. Okay. The one thing I do not do anymore is fill my properties with tenants. So I do use a property manager to help me assist me with that. Okay. However, I give them my criteria. I tell them unless an applicant meets this criteria, I don't want to know about them. I don't want to hear about them. And I have the final say. Basically, I still do the analysis with respect to the short list of candidates. But it's actually a big apprehension that some of my investors even have. You know, a lot of them are located within the Greater Toronto area, and they have the same questions, like how the heck do you manage all these properties across the entire Greater Golden Horseshoe? And the answer is quite easy. You build up a good A-level team of contractors in each municipality.
Yeah.
I had one client ask me that same question as I was showing him properties in St. Catharines. And, you know, somebody's ears must have been burning because all of a sudden I got a call from a tenant saying, hey, the furnace is conked out. Something's not working here. I go, remember that question you just asked me? Here's how I handle it. So I pick up the phone, talk to the tenant. I'm like going, okay, no problem. text them over the contact detail for my HVAC guy. I go, set up a mutually convenient time for a service call. I don't want to play the broken telephone game, right? Let them decide mutually as to when is the right appropriate time.
Absolutely.
The HVAC guy, if it's something, this is my A-level team. I've been utilizing their services for many, many years. If it's something small, they'll just fix it. All I get is a final invoice basically coming into my email, and I pay it immediately. If it's something more serious, they'll actually contact me and we'll decide like what the next course of action is. And even though I can replace toilets myself, and I have done replacing toilets myself, that was kind of one of my mistakes when I was starting out. There's no way in heck I'm going to go all the way to, let's say, Niagara Falls to replace a toilet these days.
No, not worth your while.
It's a full day's ordeal. I mean, at the end of the day, you're paying for the toilet regardless. Is my time worth a couple of $100 that my plumber is going to charge me to replace a toilet, and I'd have to waste a whole day? No, right? So I don't bother with that stuff anymore.
So I'm actually glad you said what you said, because if you put good tenants in and you have a good team, like you said, an A team for contractors, you can self-manage quite easily.
Very easily.
I, by the way, mention in this book. Because I've got 3 properties in 3 different locations in Alberta, and I have fabulous handyman in Fort Mac. I have a team of people there too, and he has a team. I've got a team here because we had a property management company. There isn't anybody we don't know in contractors, and Gil's got people in BC as well. So you can easily manage it with good people.
Yeah, the only time it becomes a bit of a challenge is if like a contractor goes bad or decides to move or close up shop. Then it's a bit of a challenge because now you have to find a replacement, but you can always draw from your other contractors within the area. Maybe the electrician is no longer available, so you contact your plumber and ask him if he can recommend an electrician. Somebody or ask some of the other people within your network, like some of these networking groups, and ask for their referrals as well. So it is manageable. But if you're dealing with an apartment building that's about 300 units, don't even try. You're just going to shoot yourself in the foot. Unless you want a different, like an additional full-time job, in addition to everything else you're doing, don't even basically think about it.
No, and you're not an investor. You're a property manager. Those are two different animals, totally.
Absolutely.
Yep. Just give me half a second. I'm just going to ask my next question. Turn my phone sideways here. What strategies are you participating in yourself today to continue leveling up your game as an investor?
So I think I already mentioned a lot of these syndicated private equity deals, both actively and passively. I'm currently invested in several development projects, both in the greater Phoenix area of Arizona and the southwestern Ontario area. We're looking in the thousands of units is what I'm invested in right now. By the way, the one thing I want to impress upon your audience, there's a lot of people like to compare how many doors they have or how many units they have under construction. A lot of it is BS. The reality is, I can invest in one of these development projects, in some cases for as low as $25,000. And then I can say that I'm involved with a project that's going to build, 500 units, which is pure hogwash, right? So don't basically compare yourself to other people out there. Do what's right for you. I do it. I split my capital across several different projects. It's a way for me to mitigate my risk because development projects in general are higher risk than your typical buy and hold. You're undertaking construction risk and approval risks and all that good stuff. So I choose not to put all my eggs in one basket. So I'd rather spread it out across several projects. And then I guess I can technically say I'm investing investing in development deals that are going to be creating thousands of units, but I'm not a 100% owner in those development projects either. I'm just participating in those deals as one of the owners. Similarly, within the multifamily space, the amount of capital required really depends on a deal by deal basis as well, whether you're dealing on a GP, general partner, limited partner structure, or a fund structure. The reality is there's an abundance of opportunities all across North America. If you don't see opportunities within your own backyard, after you speak to all the gurus within the market, there's a plethora of other opportunities available all across North America. It's just a matter of basically seeking them out and speaking to the right people who can introduce you to the right parties to show you where those opportunities are.
Yeah, great. And then you already talked about you've got active and passive, which is great. And just you figured that out based on what works for you and where you want to invest and all those other good things. So that's great.
Yeah, and I mean, the reality is, I mean, if I wanted to, I could just invest as a passive partner in all of these private equity deals. I choose to level up because I want to continue my, professional development essentially, and my skill development by becoming an active partner. And one of the things that I get to do is, if I'm a limited partner, sometimes I'm able to come in on board and basically be part of this active group as part of the general partner group and learn the ropes. I mean, that's one of the great pieces of advice I would recommend to anyone. If you don't know how to do something, find a mentor who's already done what you're trying to do. And that goes all the way from as low as maybe a single family home buy and hold strategy, all the way to buying thousands of multifamily units, right? A mentor and good coaching will help you eliminate a lot of the risks that you might and pitfalls that you might have to experience on your own without that level of knowledge. So, it could save you literally hundreds if not millions of dollars.
As we say, learn from other people's mistakes.
Well, I wish I learned those mistakes myself, because I tended to be a very hands-on person as when I initially started investing. Like I said, I used to change toilets myself, which is stupid. But the reality is, that was my best way of learning each one of these strategies. I mean, I've done everything: student rentals, rent to owns, buy and hold, private money lending, 2-unit, 3-unit conversions, multifamilies, but a lot of these type of strategies, I actually had to throw myself into these strategies myself and figure it out on my own, right? I did have other investors, within my network that I could ask questions. So indirectly, I did have some mentors out there, and vice versa. We help each other out along the way as well. It's not, you have to have this abundance mindset at the end of the day, right? A lot of people like to hold their secrets close to their chest. I'm the polar opposite of that. I don't care whether there's anything in it for me. I will try to help out anyone in any situation that they're facing, as long as I'm capable of doing so. And if I'm not, I'll try to basically point them in the right direction or refer them to the individual that should be able to help them out, with any issues that they may have.
So did your wife come on board with you? I know this isn't part of our questioning, but did she come on board with your real estate as well? Or is she kind of off on the sidelines with your smile on your face?
Yeah, she's off on the sidelines, but here's the funny thing. My wife is a condo property manager. So she's a designated licensed property manager in the province of Ontario. But yet I'm the property manager for all of our properties across Ontario. And I'm pretty much, at this stage, I'm pretty much running my own real estate investing company effectively based on my endeavors. My wife tends to be pretty hands-off with this stuff.
I started writing a book on property investing before I did the Canadian Landlord's Handbook, shameless plug, and interviewed a whole bunch of different investors who had various types of investor strategies. And some of them, it ended up ending their marriage because one person was very risk averse and the other person was taking all these risks with their savings and their line of credit and, whatever equity or capital they had anywhere. And the partner said, I can't do this. I just can't sleep at night. And they split up. So when you talk about when you had your daughter, which effectively ended your job, you just said, that's it. I'm not going back to the corporate world. I'm going to wing it here and no income. I mean, I just kind of half wonder what she thought about that. If she was like, wow, what are you talking about? We've got a baby.
Yeah. Funny you should mention that. I mean, she's actually one of those risk averse individuals. And we actually paid off our mortgage back in the 2007, 2008 on our principal residence. Mm-hmm. And clearly a lot of the sources of capital for a lot of novice investors or somebody who already owns a home is their own principal residence, because you can draw from that equity. She didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. I have all this hundreds of thousands of dollars that I can access potentially. And she's like going, nope. So it took a while. I mean, it took about a good 5 years of me doing what I was doing to show her, like, to show her the proof of the pudding, as the saying goes, the results, until she started kind of warming up to it. I had to get her into maybe doing some private money lending first. And she really liked that, using some HELOC funds or taking out a small mortgage on our property. And then subsequently, both she and I became much more comfortable with, undertaking millions of dollars of debt but in a very prudent manner. I'm not saying, over leverage yourself. I mean, one of the things, even with all my refis, I mean, I'm not doing my refis all in 1 year. So it was very kind of staggered. And as a result of that, my own loan to value, even to this very day, is easily under 60%. So worst case scenario, I sell off the properties, no problem. I'm still debt free, right?
You had while she got sort of educated, and she warmed up to it over time. But it took about 5 years, right?
Well, there was a trust level in me as well. I mean, remember, I'm managing everything. I'm sourcing the deals. I'm doing everything basically.
Yep.
So, these days, essentially, I send her an email every month, basically saying, okay, here's the reconciliation. Here's the amount of money that's getting dumped into the account. Right. So she sees money coming into her account every month. I mean, it's not as if, and consistently.
You haven't been hiding it. You've been very transparent. So that's the other thing too. It's not like it's some secret deal you're doing off on the side and you're just going to tell her when you get $1 million check. It's like, be part of the process. Let me show you what's going on.
But anecdotally speaking, I mean, like I deal with a lot of investor clients as well. So I've seen, both ends of the spectrum. Generally speaking, there usually is one partner that's driving a lot of this real estate investing endeavors. That's generally what happens. On the rare occasion, both of them kind of are involved, right? But generally, it's usually one person driving it. And that is just the challenge of getting the other partner on board and showing them the results and knowing what the heck you're doing, and obviously doing it prudently, risk mitigation strategies, that sort of stuff as well. Like one of the things that we're dealing with right now, like, the amount of dollars flying back and forth in my bank accounts on a monthly basis is like staggering. If I had to think about the dollars going back and forth in investments, some investments are exiting, other ones we're entering into, it's staggering. I mean, I would never thought that this would ever happen, 12 years ago. Some of these figures are like in excess of like 2, 3, 4 times your annual income for some people. But the reality is anybody can reach that stage as well. But you have to do it prudently, and avoid being a speculator. There's a big difference between a speculator and an investor, right? Speculation. Technically, if you invest in real estate properly and the right way, with positive cash flow in mind, and preferably in an area that has good potential for appreciation as well. I mean, technically speaking, you require absolutely zero appreciation whatsoever to achieve your goals. I mean, I'll give you a very quick example. Simple buy and hold strategy. Okay. 30-year mortgage, right? 20% down. What's the worst thing that can happen to you after that 30-year period? The worst thing that you achieve is now you have a fully paid off asset that's now popping up significantly more cash flow because you're no longer paying that mortgage to the bank anymore.
Right.
And effectively, it's doubling, whatever you could possibly expect as your maximum CPP. Even if you maximize your contribution for your Canada pension plan from the beginning of your working career all the way to retirement, it would still be less than what you'd be making on that one single property in cash flow on a monthly basis. So effectively, that one property will change your life simply because you're already doubling your CPP. And that's just one property. And the most simplistic strategies.
When you said what's the worst thing that can happen to you in 20 years, and I started having horror flashbacks to Fort McMurray, 2 floods, fires.
I knew that was coming.
That's where insurance comes in.
I was actually getting a dry mouth when you were talking. I'm like, ah! Anyway, I won't interrupt anymore. Please feel free to ask the last question there.
Give me 1 second. My questions have disappeared again just for a minute. Okay. So I think you've answered this one too, but I think it's a good one to revisit. Can any investor participate and employ these specific strategies? And what type of investors would you say such strategies are most appropriate for?
For the basic buy and hold strategies, almost anybody can participate in those as long as you have access to that capital and credit. And even if you don't, I mean, you could technically do joint ventures. I would typically not recommend doing joint ventures right off the bat. Unless you are a money partner and want to be passive in nature, you could certainly basically deal with that. But if you want to learn the ropes, I would highly recommend you do it yourself first, because that's how you build trust with other individuals. Because if you undertake other joint venture partners, you want to show them a proof of concept. You want to show them exactly what you have done. Here are the past projects. Here are my current properties. This is what I bought them for. this is all the good, the bad, and the ugly that I had to go through. And despite all of that, this is what I achieved, right? Be fully transparent with those individuals. Now, that's for the novice investors. For the more intermediate investors, it really comes down to leveling up your game. Like, people can be very successful just employing one single strategy, as long as that strategy continues to work. If it doesn't work anymore, then maybe explore other options. If those options are not working any longer, start exploring other areas, right? So there's always going to be opportunities out there. It's just a matter of, evaluating each opportunity, and that includes evaluation of the markets. Like you mentioned, Fort McMurray, for example. I personally would not invest in that area because I'm looking much more for a much more diversified economy on both the micro and a macro level, where I'm not dependent on one specific industry that can go belly up or goes in the ups and downs of the oil market in say, Alberta, or even in Timmins, Ontario. You have the mining sector down there, up and down like a roller coaster as well, right? So when the times are good, I remember going down to Alberta. I used to travel there on a weekly basis. In 2007, before the financial crisis, you couldn't even find, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners will remember, you couldn't even get into a Tim Hortons and they couldn't find staff. All the drive-thrus were closed. Yeah. I arrived at the most filthiest Tim Hortons I've ever seen in my life. Try to go through a drive-thru because I had to drive back to Calgary from Edmonton to catch my flight, and I wanted to grab a coffee in the middle of wintertime. So I arrived there and the drive-thru is closed. I walk into the Tim Hortons. There's 5 people in front of me. Garbage piled up all the way. And the reason being, there's only 2 people working there. And as I walk in, one of them clocked out. There was one person running the entire show. It took me the longest to get a cup of coffee out of any other Tim Hortons. It took me about 45 minutes to 50 minutes just to get a cup of coffee there.
That sounds like Fort McMurray. I remember my first week there, I went into a restaurant and I had to go into the kitchen and find the staff so they could give me cutlery so I could eat my meal. Because they didn't have anybody. And they could not find people to staff, and so people kept coming and saying, I worked at the Keanu College at the time, and they said, we really need customer service training here. I said, well, we need staff here. This is a very limited place to get staff. So, yeah. Absolutely. But when the market was good, when you could rent, I was making in my house, I was cash flowing. I was making a profit of $4,000 a month.
Oh, it was amazing.
Renting. It was amazing. I remember people paid in cash at the time. And, just having so much money, I couldn't fit it into my wallet and thinking, I love this.
It was amazing. And you know what? I think the province of Alberta, the leadership there finally is getting their act together. They're trying to incentivize more diversity within their industry bases, getting some more high-tech firms coming in, more medical firms coming in, more academia. But the reality is, personally, what am I doing today? I have explored Alberta, and I'm not discounting it altogether. I'm just finding better opportunities with lower risk that offer better returns south of the border.
Yeah, and I've heard this many times. And I will have somebody in talking about that in future opportunity. And we had an investor come in a while ago too. He actually bought in Arizona when there was the financial crash in the United States.
Oh, that was an awesome time to buy. Absolutely.
Yeah, he got three. He got 3 properties there, and he said the return has been 360%. He loves to tell me about that every single time he talks to me, which of course I really appreciate.
But you don't have to go all the way that far either. Look what happened in southwestern Ontario. Our returns have been even more stupendous than there in a lot of cases, right? So it really comes down to, you can even find it locally in a lot of cases, right? But
I actually really like what you said, because you just have to figure out what works for you, find a property that works for you, in a region that works for you, and crunch the numbers and see how that works. There isn't a magic bullet. A lot of people say, well, how can I go in and make a lot of money? Well, it depends on so many factors, and the economy is always changing. The world is always changing. The pandemic affected everybody in every industry, so we couldn't have seen that one coming. So you have to you've got a really agile approach to adapting to whatever's going on at the time. It's like, okay, this isn't working. Where are we going? That's not working. We're going to do this. How can we make this work with what we've got?
I totally agree. And the reality is, I usually tell my clients that being a real estate investor is better than any MBA program out there. Now, let me explain. Mm-hmm. The fact that we have to adapt so quickly, we as human beings grow, individually by our ability to adapt, as opposed to stagnating or, not acting or adapting to change. Industries that were not able to adapt, and there's a plethora of them. I mean, take a look at Blockbuster, for example. Where are they now? Right? They were in every corner neighborhood mall, and now they're non-existent. They're defunct. Kodak, remember the film business? They've been around for over 100 years. They're gone. It all comes down to their inability to adapt to the times and change in times. And real estate works exactly the same way in a lot of respects. People who hold on fast on one strategy or one specific geography can end up getting burnt if they either don't adapt or they continue doing what they're doing where the numbers no longer make sense. So you got to be very careful. The other thing, if you go, and that's on the macro level, of course, you always want to have the diverse industry base, because if one of these industries goes belly up, you're still okay, right? So that's why I'm not focused in areas like Fort Mac or Timmins, for example, right? And the other thing is, you have to go on the micro level as well within each municipality. You as an investor have to determine for yourself, what kind of tenant class do I want? It's not just the numbers, because on a pro forma basis, if I go into a really crappy area of town, believe me, the pro formas will look amazing. Cash flow coming out of the yin yang.
Oh yeah.
Right. But any intermediate or advanced real estate investor, or any investor who's been in the market long enough, will know that basically, if you focus on those specific areas, what kind of tenant class are you going to be attracted?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's one thing we used to say when we had a property management business. We only took mid to upscale properties.
Correct.
Because we'd say your property is going to attract the type of tenants that it looks like. So if you have a filthy, dirty property, that's who you're going to attract, because those are the only people who are going to look for, someone who's clean cut, well dressed, good job, good income. They're not going to want a property like that. They want a property they can come to, that they're proud to go home to, happy to live in, and that they're proud to have people over. So, some people we could not make understand that. Of course, we didn't take them as clients, but you really, and also you might be getting good cash flow like I did in Fort Mac, but the tenants were so transient, because the town was so transient. So I'd be looking for tenants. A long-term tenant when I was in Fort Mac was considered 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
6 months. So in Edmonton, I've got a property there, and my tenants stay for years. I've got a property in Calgary. My current tenant's been with me 6 years, and he has no plans to leave.
But
so
there's pros and cons with that too, though.
Yeah, there are.
Right. So in Ontario, unlike Alberta, we have rent control. So any properties built prior to November 15th, 2018 are under rent control. We have an issue happening right now. We don't have the tenant turnover that we want to have. In some of my houses, I have fully detached homes in Hamilton. They're paying under $2,000 for a property that today would be renting out for mid 3,000s. It's clearly still working for me, but I can't evict them. I can't increase the rent to actuals, and I have been increasing it based on the allowables, but you're falling further and further behind.
Yeah, the allowables going to come close to the inflation rate.
Yeah.
You actually do want your tenants to move out. I'd say my sweet spot is anywhere from 3 years to 5 years, right? Because you want to get that market rent. Like in Alberta, it's not an issue. You guys can increase it to whatever the heck you want for the most part. But in these type of jurisdictions, and this is what the viewers here should be aware of as well. Know what your landlord laws are all about.
Oh yeah.
Right. And it's not that you can't succeed within those real estate strategies. It's just a matter of basically learning how to play the game properly.
Yeah.
Right?
You need to know the rules so that you can play within it. Or
in BC, there's a couple of differences from Alberta too. One is that a fixed term lease automatically rolls into a month by month in BC. So you can't just end a lease at the end of the lease. That's not an option. And we also have rent control. So we're also behind the inflation 8 ball.
It's difficult, right?
It's really ridiculous when the government, I shouldn't say this, but when the government gets their hand in it and they try and run businesses, they don't know what they're doing, and they mess things up for everybody.
No, lots of collateral damage. Absolutely.
I was going to put a plug in for real estate as opposed to corporate work. I've been in the corporate world for many years, and there's a lot of times they hire all these people with delicious brains and great credentials, and a lot of times you're sitting on your hands waiting for somebody else to make a decision for you. When you're in real estate, you make your own decisions for yourself. So yes, that's
hands better than any other MBA that you can get out there. You learn, you get excellent people skills, because think about it, just interaction with tenants, with contractors. You're dealing with people with different personalities. with different demeanors, and you're trying to go forward to achieve, to achieving your goal that you're trying to achieve. And you have to manage all that and be able to learn how to manage all of that in order to be effective. Highly, highly, valuable skill set that you can apply to all areas of your life.
Yeah,
right?
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So, and a lot of people don't seem to realize that. They're thinking it's just, a lot of people have this in their mind that, oh, it's all going to be passive. I'll just collect my rent check. No, it doesn't work that way. Not, the reality is, like 70% of the time, yes, but tenants will come and go, and you have to deal with some renovations, and you might have to deal with an eviction, or you might have to deal with repairs and maintenance in the middle of the night. It's a matter of basically setting up those systems in place to enable you to still kind of live the life you want to live.
Yeah.
But not avoiding those issues. Those issues are not going to go away. You got to basically deal with those.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I found as from my own evolution is stuff that used to scare the crap out of me 10, 20 years ago, even, I don't even blink an eye on anymore. I just get it done.
That's
basically.
great. That's
right.
great.
And I've seen that happening with every single investor that I've ever dealt with. That, from start, they felt exactly the same way, anxieties, fears, overcoming those fears. And finally, they're in the same position as well. It's a matter of adapting, pivoting, challenging yourself, leveling up, getting yourself out of that comfort zone. The more you do that, the more comfortable you're going to get with dealing with those issues much more effectively and with much less stress. As long
That's
as
nice to hear. There's a light at the end of the tunnel here. And speaking of lights at the end of the tunnel, tell us about your special offers.
Yes. So I actually have two. So because I have to recognize the fact that, your viewers, are either novice investors, intermediate investors, or advanced investors. So I'm going to have two separate offers for either a novice investor all the way to even advanced investors. I'd like to offer a free one-on-one coaching session for 15 minutes where you can ask me absolutely anything. I'll be more than happy to, if you're a novice, I'll help you focus and point you in the right directions with respect to maybe what kind of strategies you should be overlooking. And you can ask me anything during that coaching session. For the more advanced investors, especially if they're already accredited, so high net worth individuals who have built up that portfolio, don't really necessarily want to add to their own portfolio and, want to get closer into that passenger seat as opposed to being active, because there's a reason why we do this. It's not to create extra work for ourselves. I'd like to offer, again, a free 30-minute phone call with them to potentially expose them to these other opportunities that I'm personally engaged in today. So those would be more of the syndicated private equity deals on both the development side or the multifamily side, or even basically if they want to explore becoming a general partner with some of these deals as well, how to go about doing that as well. So like I said, it's kind of my way of paying it forward. I don't care if I get anything out of it. I just want to.
And very generous. Thank you very much. So how do they get hold of you to access these fabulous deals?
So anybody can reach me at either my email, which is Felix, Felix at Cloud9Life. That's CLOUD, the number 9, life.ca. Or they can connect with me on Facebook. Just type in my first and last name, Felix Wortman, or on my Facebook group, cloud9life.ca as well. And I'll be more than happy to set up a phone call with them.
Thank you very much. Those are wonderful offers. And thank you very much for being on this program. You have been a complete wealth of information. I think we could probably talk for another 2 hours.
I tell my clients the same thing. Yeah. If you get me talking about real estate, I can go on for hours and hours. So, yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I love it too.
And I love to see all the different things that are available for people and that you can get in it at any level. Because a lot of people think, oh, I didn't get into it when I was in my 20s. I can't do it. You can at any age. And there's so many different strategies that you can employ, such as the ones Felix was talking about, that, you just need to be aware of what they are and take a look at your own personal circumstances and then figure out how you can make it work for yourself. So, and of course, if you want free access to landlording and investing resources, jump onto my website, neldaschulte.com, and click the green membership button and you're good to go. And of course, if you want my book, I haven't shamelessly advertised this in at least 10 seconds. So, it's time. And if you like this, video. I'm going to post it on YouTube. Please share it, like it, and subscribe. And thank you again very much, Felix, for joining us and sharing your wealth of information. It's been very generous of you. Much appreciated.
It's
Yes.
an absolute pleasure, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gil, Father Christmas, for joining us. We're going to
Whoa,
ask
whoa.
you for Christmas gifts in a couple weeks. Okay, good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye for now.
Guys.
Bye-bye.
Have a great night.
You too.